Hi, good day everyone. My name is Mr. Jonathan David D. De La Cruz again. We are back in Science, Technology, and Society, Chapter 1, History of Science and Technology, Lesson 3. So for Lesson 3, we will be talking about natural philosophers, the hows and whys of us. So there are a lot of flourishing um, ancient civilizations, no? We already talked about alchemy, that it came from the land of Chem, which is Egypt. And Egypt, no, ay isang napakalagong tawag doon, civilization. This civilization flourished for a very long time. They have their own philosophers, alchemists, and then philosophers. And then followed by uh, the Mesopotamia, or the Babylonian Empire, the Sumerian empires, which also had their own fair share when it comes to um, fair share when it comes to history, when it comes to alchemy, when it comes to philosophy also. But we will be talking today about the civilization that had a lot of contributions to natural philosophy. Sa kanila nag-umpisa yung madaming forms of knowledge na meron tayo sa kasalukuyan. Okay? So this is the civilization of the Greek civilization. So the Greeks were people of interest. The Greeks are also uh, practice natural philosophy, which means they practice the intellect, was self-conscious inquiry into nature. So it means that yes, no, asking questions started at Egypt and even the Mycenaean Empire, but the self-conscious inquiry on nature started with the Greek civilization. So the Greeks are uh, rose started at 800 BCE to 600 BCE. Ang dense ng scientific knowledge sa kanila, kung saan may pinakamataas o pinakamadaming contribution nila, is around 600 to 400 BCE. Yan. Ancient Greek philosophers were not purely scientists, as there was no single discipline of science then. They did not make detailed or any accurate knowledge based on observations, but they came up with many theories and attempts to take accounts and answer the questions whys and hows in the material world. So since there is no single form of science, since there is no single form of science during that time, they are called natural philosophers because they question natural phenomena in the material world. Halimbawa, sila yung mga unang taong nagtanong saan nga ba gawa yung mga bagay-bagay. No? But then again, we also know that Greeks are really rich when it comes to mythology. They have a very strong foundation when it comes to Greek mythology, and Greek mythology is still being taught until today in many schools or many programs. But Greeks also drew the red lines between the abstract and the material world. They tried to separate the myth and the truth, and the practice of natural philosophy became a conquest for abstract knowledge. So we will be discussing natural philosophers in the Greek during the time of the Greeks, starting with the pre-Socratics. What do we mean by the pre-Socratics? Are you familiar with Socrates? So pre-Socratic era or pre-Socratic philosophers are philosophers before Socrates. There were many philosophers in the ancient Greek. in the ancient Greeks who have taken initiatives to spark questions on the material world. During this time, they also created the school of thought. School of thought, this is not a literal school, hindi ito yung eskwelahan o building na pupunta yung mga tao. No? Instead, the school of thought is a school for teachers and both students. Pupunta sila sa kahit saan lugar, whether it be a garden or inside an establishment, and they will be discussing a certain topic and they will have a rational debate. Pagtatalunan nila yung natural phenomena, pagtatalunan nila, pag di-discuss, no, sorry, hindi pagtatalunan, they will intellectually discuss using rational debates the situations to confirm and decline their observations. Dito nagkakaroon ng unified thoughts yung mga philosophers, if they agree or disagree. Kaya ito tinawag ng school of thoughts. Because everything that you discuss inside or in the school is based on rationality and logic. The first person that I will be discussing will be Thales. Thales, he was the first European philosopher that was recorded in the ancient Greece that contributed in crafting knowledge. He is the first. No? He was also known to be first of many things. He was also able to develop the Thales theorem. He believed in separating the divinities of the gods to the power of the human intellect. Knowledge became an object, but this doesn't mean that he was against them. He in fact believed things have souls within them. Thales is the first person to question the separity or the unification of truth and the divinities. Ibig sabihin, he's the first person to challenge the divinities and the truth using observations and experimentations. Pero, hindi ibig sabihin nun na kine-question niya yung mga nangyayari sa paligid, yung mga natural phenomena. It doesn't mean that he doesn't believe in their gods during that time. He still believes in them. No? So right now, gaya ngayon, sa panahon ngayon, if a scientist questions natural phenomena, it doesn't mean that he doesn't believe in a divinity or a divine being behind everything. Thales, he was also regarded as the founder of the first European school called the School of Philosophy, the Milesian Schools. Take note pag sinabi kong Milesian Schools, ito ay School of Philosophy developed or founded by Thales. This school was known for its articulate attempts in explaining the natural and the material world and started making theories about them. The theories of Thales was later on dismissed by Plato and Aristotle. The natural philosophy started even before Thales, but Thales is the first person that we will be discussing because he is the first person recorded in the European region. He developed the school of philosophy called the Milesian Schools, wherein the Milesian Schools is also referred as the school of thoughts. Okay? Pero as I have said a while in a past lecture that in science, what is true now cannot be true before, or what is true before in the past can be not true at the present. That's why it is possible to debunk certain ideas or theories. Kagaya nga nung ginawa ni Plato and Aristotle when they debunked certain theories of Thales. The next is Anaximander. Anaximander is also one of the Greeks to contribute to the body of knowledge. He has more recorded theories than Thales because he is also the first European philosopher to write down his ideas. In science, it is very important to take note on your observations, take note on your experimentations, and take note on what is happening based on your observations and observations alone. Bawal kang magdagdag ng kung ano-ano, no? And Anaximander has more accounts compared to Thales kasi mas masipag magsulat si Anaximander. So take note po, no, if you are in the field of engineering or science or in any fields, taking notes is very important. He believed that the material world and the natural world is governed by discoverable laws. He also rejected the theory of Thales about the watery universe, and instead he proposed his own explanation by introducing the formless initial state called the Empyrean. When you say Empyrean, it is a state wherein everything wants to go to its normal state, or should I say stable state. Naniniwala si Anaximander that there are universal laws governing the world. Universal laws wherein, example, the law of gravity. It is very applicable all throughout the world. But during that time, hindi pa naman na-discover yung law of gravity. But Anaximander believed that there is a possibility there is a big possibility that the world is governed with laws of nature. Diba? Example, law of conservation of energy, law of conservation of mass, the law of gravity. These are laws that was discovered later on. But Anaximander is the first person to say that that the natural world is governed by law. Okay. He also believed in Empyrean. This is a belief where something might turn to something and sometimes it is the opposite. Example, kagaya sinabi ko kanina, it is a state wherein an object or a material wants to go back to its original or stable state. But sometimes it's the opposite. Example, pag may mainit na bagay, the tendencies is it will go back to a normal temperature. And then sabi niya, pwede din from hot to cold. Another thing is pag naglaba ka, di ba, it's wet. The cloth is wet. And then it will turn dry. So naniniwala siya that everything turns to something, and sometimes it is the opposite. Kagaya nga nun, yung basa natutuyo, yung mainit lumalamig. Ganon. That's the Empyrean that Anaximander believed. He also worked on astronomy and geometry since he specializes in mathematics also. He was also known for introduction of the gnomon, which is used by the Asian philosophers for over 2 millennia. This also helped Anaximander develop a model of cosmos and attempted to picture the heavenly wheels. What is this gnomon? Itong nasa picture na to, yung gnomon, itong nakatayo na right triangle, that's the gnomon. The gnomon helps identify the time that they have during that time. But this is actually being used by the Asian philosophers even before the Greek philosophers did it. We do not know kung nag-meet ba sila or nagkita ba sila. But one thing is for sure, that both the Western and the Eastern world are having advances in understanding astronomy and time and science and natural philosophy. Anaximander also worked on possibility of animal transformation, which is influenced by Greek myths. This work was one of which primordial points of starting to ask question, where did we come from? Which eventually led to the theory of evolution. Okay. Before the theory of evolution by Charles Darwin, marami na nagtatanong tungkol saan nga ba nanggaling ang tao. But the first person to question this according to recorded accounts is si Anaximander. Pero ang kinaibahan, si Anaximander kasi hinaluan niya ng paniniwala. Example, if you're watching Greek mythologies, Zeus has the capability to become in any forms of animals, one of which is very common is eagle. So, syempre, dahil myth yun, it's influenced by mythology, influenced by their divinity, it is not accepted in the field of science. But then again, this has influenced other natural philosophers and scientists later on. Kaya yun. Next is Empedocles or Empedocles. So first is Thales, and then Anaximander, and then Empedocles or Empedocles. Let me just give you a clarification that what I'm discussing is not all the natural philosophers. I've only selected natural philosophers that I find very relevant dito sa STS, or sa History of Science and Technology. But I'm not saying na sila lang yung relevant. It's a separate course, separate understanding. Okay, so Empedocles, he is the last great thinker and philosopher that was said to be associated with the Milesian schools. This is Empedocles. Empedocles also wrote a book called On the Nature. Here, he formed his theories in 4 classical elements. Diba? Elements, earth, air, fire, and water. And adding all these 2 strong forces are love and strife. One of the primeval questions of the philosophers that they attempted to answer was the question, what is matter? Okay. So during this time, when Empedocles asked, what is matter? They looked into elements, and the elements that we have during that time ay hindi yung nasa periodic table na hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon, nitrogen. Ang elements lang dati ay water, earth, fire, air. No? Water, earth, fire, air. Parang avatar lang. Kaya if you can see the picture, it's like an avatar-like thing. No? But you see, it was very simple during that time. Pag tinanong ka, what are the elements? Water, earth, fire, air. But what is matter? Matter is made up of small things. Ang sagot nila, matter is made up of small things that are made up of the smaller things of a being. Example, ang water gawa daw sa maliliit na tubig. Ang earth gawa sa maliliit na earth. Ang hangin ay gawa sa maliliit na hangin. Ang apoy ay gawa sa maliliit na apoy. Yun yung pinaniniwalaan nila. Diba? But then again, we cannot reject that because that was the truth during their time. Yun yung totoo sa sagot nila. Kasi pag tinanong mo sila before, during the time of Empedocles, if you ask them, what are the elements? Ang sasagot lang nila, water, earth, fire, air. Pag sinabi mo ay hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, etc., entire periodic table, ikaw yung mali. But if you come to present, no, what are the chemical elements? The correct answer would be those in the periodic table and not just earth, fire, air, and water. Okay, I hope we're clear. Next is Pythagoras. Pythagoras is the triangle guy. If you check the logo of TUP, you'll see that the logo of TUP is really driven by Pythagoras, the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, Pythagoras is one of the most famous pre-Socratic philosophers. He studied the philosophy of Milesians, but he was more abstract thinker. Kaya si Empedocles ang last natural philosopher during the pre-Socratic era to be related with Milesian schools because Pythagoras already started to think abstract. Okay. He was the one who introduced idealism in the practice of science. An idealist like him generates abstract models of perfect materials. Unlike the Milesian schools, they base their rational debates only on observations. But Pythagoras is a mathematician, and he introduced idealism. Diba? Ngayon, if you see science today, there are things that you calculate correctly but cannot be observed correctly at the natural world. Diba? But this largest contribution known until today is his math. His idealism shifted from Egyptian and Mesopotamian mathematics, which are practical mathematics, to new and pure mathematics, which is called geometry. Now, Egyptians and Mesopotamian mathematics are very, very good. Um, the Egyptians are the first people to have ma- uh, mathematical measurements. Mathematical measurements. Sila yung unang gumamit ng mga metric systems. The cubit system to measure the length, the height of the pyramids, the Great Pyramids. The Mesopotamians also use it. The Sumerians, the Babylonians, when they constructed great infrastructures. Sila, ang mathematics nila ay practical mathematics. Why practical mathematics? Because their mathematics is used. Their mathematics is currently used in engineering today, in civil engineering to be specific, or mechanical engineering, in construction. Yung Egyptian and Mesopotamian mathematics, doon nang galing yung measurement mathematics. No? But Pythagoras introduced an idealistic way of understanding mathematics through geometry and algebra. But algebra did not start from Greece. No? It started somewhere else. Kagaya na nabanggit ko last time, algebra came from the Middle East. But Pythagoras introduced an idealistic way of viewing mathematics. So dito na nagkakaroon ng pure philosophy ang mathematics. Pythagoras' creation of the pure, elegant, and abstract mathematics became a model of proving systems of knowledge, which is being used now as practice in science to prove a point. After all, math is the language of science. But do not say that in front of a mathematician, because mathematicians, or many mathematicians, believe that mathematics is a separate and independent body of knowledge. But it's sometimes interdisciplinary with science. Technically, yeah. Technically naman kasi, math is the language of science because math is being used to prove scientific ideas and scientific principles. Okay. Ano ang tingin ni Pythagoras sa mga numbers? Kasi ang tingin ng iba, pag nakakita ng numbers, sumasakit mata nila, di ba? But Pythagoras views mathematics or numbers are not just mere counting numbers. Numbers are sacred. He believed that numbers are something that can answer then all the questions in the universe. And he also hated irrational numbers. He wants full numbers. Okay, so we're done with the mathematician. Now let's go to the chemist part because I'm a chemist. No, Democritus. Democritus was one of the most known natural philosophers in the PreSocratic era. PreSocratic era that contributed a lot in science and was the first to scientifically answer the question, what is matter? What is matter made of, using philosophical approach. And the biggest thread in Greek contribution of the knowledge was atomism. The theories remain theory until today, but has been supported through time. Let's go to the atomic theory, atomic model. Democritus is a natural philosopher. Kung pagtataka kayo, bakit nilalagay lagi sa history ng atomic model si Democritus? Why? Because he's the first person to ask the question and tries to answer it with a specific answer that that matter is made up of some things smaller, which are called atoms. Kaya atomism. Democritus held an idea that small particle that is indestructible, uncreated, always in motion, an infinite number, which in many forms and size. In his attempt to answer the question, what is matter? Like the Milesians, he was also a materialist. To test his hypothesis, he held the bottle filled with air and place it under the water to prove that air is made up of something as it forms bubbles. This allowed him to come up with the theory, but he still had a lot to prove. He argued with many fellow philosophers, Zeno and Parmenides, using the void hypothesis. Okay, so Democritus is the first person to believe that everything is made up of a smaller particles. These small particles are inseparable or indestructible. They are not created, no? They're always in motion and infinite in number. Now, how did he try to prove this? Kumuha siya ng jar na walang laman, nilublob niya sa tubig, at pinakawalan niya. At may nabuong bubbles. This is called the void hypothesis. Ibig sabihin, kung nag-form ng bubbles yung jar na ni-release niya, ang sabi niya, please do not judge them kasi during that time iba yung way of thinking of people. Okay? 'Di ba simple experiment lang? Tatakpan mo yung jar or bottle, ilalagay mo sa ilalim ng tubig, i-release mo yung hangin. When you release your hand, when you remove your hand, it will create bubbles. If it create bubbles, ibig sabihin, there is something inside it. Kasi pinakita niya yung jar. Yung jar, pag tinanong mo yung tao, is there something in this jar? The answer is, wala. Kasi wala naman talagang laman. Tinakpan niya, nilagay niya sa ilalim ng tubig. Nung nirelease niya yung kamay niya, nag-form ng bubbles. Paano nagkaroon ng formation ng bubbles? Ibig sabihin, may laman ito. Dito niya umpisahang buuin yung void hypothesis wherein everything is actually made up of something based on the void hypothesis. This is a short role play on their debate. Democritus and Zeno and Parmenides versus Zeno and Parmenides. Democritus asked, "What is air?" Zeno and Parmenides answered, "Nothing." Democritus answered, "You're wrong. Everything is made up of little invisible bits of matter. I call them atoms." But Zeno and Parmenides, "But my friend, what is between the atoms?" And Democritus answered, "Nothing. Between the atoms, there are only void." That is the void hypothesis. You are caught in a paradox, my friend. If everything is made up of something and the void is a thing, then the void is made up of atoms. But then, what is between the atoms of the void? Oh, nakakalito, di ba? Pinagtatalunan po nila dyan, ito po ay made up script. But there are recorded accounts that they really had debates about air, about atom. Nagtanong si Democritus, air. Ang sagot ni Zeno, tsaka ni Parmenides, nothing. And then sinabi ni Democritus that everything is made up of something, and I call it atoms, including air. And what are between atoms? Tinanong ni Zeno at saka ni Parmenides. Ang sagot niya ay wala, void. Pero ang sabi naman nitong dalawa, if void is a thing, ibig sabihin gawa din ito sa atoms. What is between the atoms of the void? Mic drop. Mic drop. But for this case, kaya nga ang theory ang theory of atom, has been debated all through the years. Hindi lang ito tinanggap agad-agad. Actually, the presence of atom has been only proven in 1905, in the early 20th century. Noon lang natanggap na may atom talaga. Diba? But, it has been supported. Now, although natalo si Democritus sa debate na to, hindi natin titingnan yung pagkatalo niya. Titingnan natin yung rational debate na sinasabi. The rational debate on atom go through many centuries. In a rational debate, it is important to take note of the structure of the dialogue. Take note of the structure of the dialogue. Kung paano nila sagutin yung mga tanong. Example, if you are part of a debate team, you do not easily say, you do not just throw arguments. You strategically throw arguments. Diba? Kaya sa scientific community, ganun din naman. Until today, there are still rational debates conducted by scientists. It is important to take note that the philosophers of the ancient Greece lived in a different time and different world. But the way they think, the way they shared their thoughts using rational debates, frame the body of knowledge on answering questions on the material world and of truth, which has echoed all throughout centuries across the world. So what I'm trying to say is that we do not judge them. Diba? Sobrang basic and simple lang nung tinatalakay nila during that time. But during that time, during the ancient Greece, that was a different time compared to the time that we have today. Okay? So, their rational debates has continually and continuously contributed to where we are today. Now, let's go to Socrates. Socrates, the urban Athens started in circa 399 BCE. During this era was the rise of famous philosophers like Socrates. He is not a natural philosopher. He did not even dwell on studying nature. His studies was more on political, morality, citizenship. But he contributed a lot in the quest of understanding the universe by asking questions, which eventually has influenced a lot of succeeding philosophers in their manner of teaching their ideas. Today we call it the Socratic method, the art of questioning. And this method is used in many disciplines for science, and we call it scientific inquiry method. This method involves constantly asking questions so that the students can break down into problems and eventually create a test and test their hypothesis. Socrates is not a natural philosopher. He is a philosopher. Pero yung paraan niya ng pagtuturo sa mga estudyante niya, yun ang ginagamit ng karamihan sa pagtuturo ng science ngayon. Have you ever encountered a teacher na hindi talaga siya nagtuturo ng lecture? Anong ginagawa niya? Nagtatanong lang siya na nagtatanong. The teacher will ask a question and then ang sasagot student, and then magtatanong siya ulit ng question and then sasagot ulit student. Magtatanong yung estudyante, ang sasagot yung ituturo niya sa estudyante kung sino kaya sumagot. Probing is very important. Questioning is very important in science. For questioning is a piety of thought. We ask questions, di ba, sa science? And Socrates may not be a natural philosopher, but his method contributed in the structure of science today. The Socratic method is used in many subjects, hindi lang naman sa science, pati sa art, pati sa history, pati sa social sciences, pati sa language. But in science, we adapted it and called it scientific inquiry method. Diba? But you see, these teachers who teach, yung sinasabi, hindi naman nagtuturo, nagtatanong lang na nagtatanong. They're actually teaching you a very important thing na hindi natuturo ng mga teachers na nagle-lecture. They are teaching you to think. Ang kailangan lang, tamang tanong at tamang pagbato ng tanong, kagaya ng sa rational debates. Asking question is important, but the way how you ask the question, the way how you answer the question is very important. Okay? At yun yung tinuro ni Socrates, not scientifically. But Socratic method is relevant, yes. It helps us use to negate hypothesis and eliminate negative hypothesis and improving possibilities of what is right. Pero, ang pinakamalaking contribution ni Socrates is not books. It's not his books, it's not his philosophical phrases, it's not his greatest contribution or not his greatest legacy. His greatest legacy would be his student and his student's student. Ang kanyang estudyante, si Plato. Okay? Socrates, naging estudyante niya si Plato. If Socrates and his students find hypothesis wrong, they will see it as good. This meant that they are learning further towards truth and away from falsehood. This is another thought about science na from Socrates na dapat isipin ng mga tao whether you are in the sciences or you are in the arts or in the other fields. If your hypothesis, if your observation and your hypothesis do not match and your hypothesis is wrong, it's okay. Okay lang yon. Ibig sabihin that you are leaning towards further truth and away from falsehood. Kasi there is actually a scientist. Lahat ng experiment niya false. Umabot ng 10,000 experiments niya. Ang hypothesis niya ay false. Anong contribution nito? Ang contribution nito, hindi na uulitin ng mga susunod na scientists yung ginawa niyang 10,000 na pagkakamali. Diba? You are negating you are already removing the negative results. You are already removing the negative results. Ganun yung nangyayari if you find your hypothesis wrong. So, usually, pero ngayon, no, kailangan tama daw. But it's okay. It's okay if your hypothesis is wrong. It's okay if you don't get it right. Kasi ang na-contribute mo doon, hindi na uulitin ng susunod na mag-experiment yung pagkakamali mo. Okay, let's go to Plato. Plato had a great impact on what is now called the metacognition. Metacognition. Please take note of that. When you say metacognition, meaning it is thinking about thinking. Di ba nag-iisip ka? That's cognition. But metacognition, iniisip mo paano ka nag-iisip. Or paano mo iniisip yung mga bagay-bagay. Halimbawa, iniisip ko saan nga ba gawa yung mga bagay. Gawa ito sa atom. Pero, paano ko naisip yung atom? Saan ko nakuha yung ganong pananaw? Di ba nakakalito? That is philosophy eh. You think about it. Until now, his establishment of physical school called academy is still being used to describe philosophical learning for higher education. Plato is also the first person to establish the school called the academy. Academy is a building, it's an establishment wherein the students go and discuss and talk about it. Plato emphasized in the original academy the training on how to think properly over the door of the academy. He was inspired by Pythagoras, thus he based his philosophy on geometry. He taught inspired idealism or a theory of nature based on abstract of the world. He believed of rules that material world is a perfect example. Plato, like Anaximander and Pythagoras, believed in idealism, believed in perfect world or perfect material world. And he is very, very drawn into what do you call this? Mathematics. So yung philosophy niya is based on geometry. No? Actually, he had to fit his observations to the theories of idealism rather than other way around. This is one of the major reasons why he was regarded as both philosopher than a scientist. But he's actually both. Okay. Plato, is he a scientist, a natural philosopher, or a pure philosopher? Kasi pag philosopher ka, you only discuss, you discuss about politics, you discuss about citizenship, kagaya nung teacher niya, si Socrates. Tropa lang, Plato. Socrates. But he is actually both. But he's more of a philosopher. Why? Dahil sa sinabi kanina. A scientist should fit his idealism to observations. Kasi ang ginagawa ng scientist, may observation ka, may hypothesis ka, itetest mo. Dapat yung idea ay mag-fit sa observation. Pero siya, ang ginagawa niya, yung observation niya, pinifit niya sa idea. Okay? The other way around. Again, kapag scientist ka, mag-observe ka, magte-test ka ng hypothesis, i-relate mo sa theory and idea. If i-fit mo yung idea sa observations mo. Pero siya, yung observations niya, i-fit niya sa idea. Okay? Gaano kamahal ni Plato ang mathematics? Gaano niya kamahal ang mathematics? Inscribed at the doors of the original Academy of Plato. Di ba, kagaya sinabi ko, meron siyang building, meron siyang academy. It's a school of, it's a school. Academy is a school. Academy yung tawag mismo. At doon, sa pinto, sa taas ng pinto, may nakalagay doon, naka-inscribe. Ang nakalagay doon, let no one enter here who is ignorant of geometry. So, kailangan, di ba? Mahal na mahal niyang mathematics. Dapat before you enter his school, you should already be knowledgeable on geometry. But, who knows, malay mo, yung ibig niyang sabihin ay pumasok ka, tuturuan ka niya ng geometry. He was also inspired by the PreSocratics, but he then developed a more complete lens on how to view the material world than they were. The PreSocratics contributed a lot and has influenced Plato also. Okay. Plato's system on cosmos was perfect. As I have said, he is like Pythagoras and Anaximander, who is an idealist and believed that the world is imperfect. He believed that the cosmos was perfect. The universe is perfect. He believed that the natural world is governed by perfect rules and believed that all materials were made of atoms with varied geometric shapes. Ito naman, varied geometric shapes called the Platonic solids. I think you have heard of this already. Each solid creates an element. Example, tetrahedron creates fire, cubes, earth, octahedron, air, icosahedron, water, and dodecahedron is the whole universe. His theory of the heavens believed that the wonders of the cosmos, both stars and the planets, a uniform circular motion. So he believes that the world is perfect, and he believes that the earth or the heavenly bodies is revolving around earth in a perfect manner. Perfect circle daw ang ikot. And naniniwala siya ganon. Pero may nangyayari dito sa mga teachers minsan. Basahin. Plato. The wandering stars and planets must move in perfect circles since the cosmos is orderly. Yung estudyante niya, may nakita, may napansin. Nakita niya yung Mars. It's moving backwards. Teacher, what about that? Pointing Mars. Why is it moving backwards and showing retrograded motion? Oh, I see. I'll look into it. I'll get back to you on that. Technically, we do not know if he got back on that student, but one thing is for sure. During that time, it is uncertain. During that time, hindi sure kung ano nga ba yung mga hindi sure kung ano nga ba ang state ng astronomy during that time. But you know, that debate took thousands of years. Yung tanong ng estudyante na yon took hundreds of years bago masagutan yung tanong na yon. Kami mga teacher, di ba minsan nagtuturo kami, may may maling makikita yung estudyante, sometimes teachers tend to be angry. But teachers should be open on that correction because the question of that student might be a primordial or a pivotal question to the next generation. Kagaya ng tanong na to. When the student asks or questioned the backward movement of the Mars, of the planet, that actually changed a lot. Okay? It actually changed a lot. Pero, di ba, astronomers would spend more than 2,000 years to answer the question of that student. Mga katanong ng estudyante, minsan mahirap talaga sagutin. But of course, as teachers, we try to search for that answer. And along the process of pursuing that understanding the cosmos, they ended up learning a lot. Dahil sa tanong na yan ng bata, madaming nagtangkang sagutin iyan. At sa pagtatangka ng bawat natural philosophers and scientists na sagutin yung tanong na yan, madami silang natutunan. They learned a lot. Just actually not sometimes related to that. Sabi nila, the success of a student is shared success of a teacher. Ito naman. When I see my students happy, I see my students learn, I feel happy too. This is Socrates. Estudyante ni Socrates, si Plato. Estudyante niya si Aristotle. Estudyante niya si Alexander the Great. If Socrates shares the success of Plato, and Plato has a piece of success in Aristotle also, and Aristotle shares the success with Alexander the Great. Hence, the success of Alexander the Great, Aristotle, and Plato is a shared success to Socrates. And whoever the teacher of Socrates is, he shares that success too. Totoo, diba? The success of a student is a shared success of a teacher. Aristotle is the star student of Plato. Is referred as the only Greek that has more written philosophies than him. Aristotle was a mentee and a rival to Plato in terms of philosophy. Why did I put rival? Mentee, ibig sabihin, mentor niya si Plato. Rival, ibig sabihin, may mga dinisprove siya sa philosophies ng kanyang teacher. These philosophies were disproved. Okay? Aristotle's philosophy has more, pero don't get me wrong, disproving some philosophies of your teacher is not bad. It's actually good. Diba? Aristotle's philosophy has more regard on common sense, unlike Plato, whose philosophy is abstract. Aristotle's work is passed on ideas that are grounded on empirical evidences. He observed the world and then explained it, developing his own theories. His order of operations is being used in the practice of modern science. Okay, so as I have mentioned a while ago, Plato is an idealist. He believed that everything is made up of a perfect circle, perfect shapes. And because he is idealist, of course, and he fits his observations to theories. But Aristotle is another way around. Aristotle accepts the possibility of chaos. Aristotle came from Macedonian roots. He came from Macedonia. He studied at the academy, the school of Plato in Athens for 20 years until Plato died. And then after mamatay ni Plato, of course, teacher niya siya, he respected him. After he died, he took a job from King Philip II of Macedonia. King Philip II is the father of Alexander the Great. He became a tutor, a teacher, a mentor for Alexander the Great. Alexander expanded his territory of the state by conquering parts of 3 continents, Asia, Africa, and Europe. Imagine how Alexander the Great have conquered all this because he listened to the counsels of Aristotle. Kaya mahalaga ang mga advisors. And meaning Aristotle might really be a good advisor because at a very young age, Alexander the Great was able to conquer a lot of territories. Pero alam nyo ba, si Aristotle ay nagsulat ng libro called Ethics, which we will be discussing further in this course, Ethics. Pero he supported his student Alexander the Great to invade Persia, kill barbarians, and conquer other states. But no regard, hindi lang naman si Aristotle ang nag-i-influence kay Alexander the Great. He remained teacher and advisor to Alexander until Alexander died at a young age, young Alex. Aristotle then decided to go back to Athens and decided to put up his own school as well as the Lyceum. When Plato died, he became an advisor, a tutor to young Alexander the Great until he became a king, he became a conqueror. But after Alex died, Aristotle decided to go back to Athens and created his own school called the Lyceum. Again, Plato had a school. The school of Plato is called Academy. The school of Aristotle is called Lyceum. These are the two great schools of philosophy and intellect, the Academy of Plato and Lyceum of Aristotle. The Academy of Plato is a building. It's an establishment. But Lyceum of Aristotle is not a building. Its classroom is the environment filled with grove trees and plant outside the city. Students and teachers walk and talk about their ideas. So kung sa academy, papasok yung estudyante, magdi-discuss sila ni teacher at a certain school, ang Lyceum ni Aristotle ay nasa labas ng Athens. May mga puno. Ang gagawin ng estudyante at ng teacher, maglalakad sila habang pinag-uusapan nila yung mga bagay-bagay. Pwede din naman umupo minsan sa grass, gano'n, sa bato. And ang tawag sa mode of teaching nila ay walk and talk. This is also called walkie. The original Academy of Plato is a training on how to think properly because they are idealistic. He was inspired by Pythagoras, thus he based his philosophies on geometry. So Academy is majorly idealist, while Lyceum is more on philosophically based on walkie, on yung teacher, estudyante, maglalakad lang and then they will discuss kung ano makita nila. Makita nila yung puno, makita nila yung aso, may aso man doon. Makita nila yung ibon, makita nila yung mga bagay-bagay na nandoon sa garden, no? And then they will discuss about it. Diba? So anything out of the blue or out of the discussion will be discussed in Lyceum. Though it is an informal education, unlike academy is a formal education, the Lyceum is an informal education. This has largely influenced because of Aristotle's interest on plants and living organisms. Okay. I hope we're clear. There are two great schools of philosophy and intellect during the natural philosophy, during the time of natural philosophers during the Greek civilization. The Academy of Plato, which is a school, and the Lyceum of Aristotle, which is a school. Also a school, but not a formal school. Aristotle also wrote on his book, work on metaphysics, on the heavens, on the soul. But his major book that is very influential up to today is his introduction to physics. Yan yung pinaka-kilala sa science ngayon. He attempted to answer the big questions about the material and the natural world and the perennial questions, what is matter? Even astronomical questions on where are we? He posed a complete system by joining the elements of the heavens, which became the basic European understanding on the physical world for 2,000 years. Plato saw the world of idealism, and Aristotle had accepted some concepts of discord, and that which naturally messes up, but always trying to go back to its original position or situation. Aristotle also loved looking at living things. He looked at them very closely and discovered details about it. As I have said a while ago, Plato is an idealist and believed in perfect world, but Aristotle accepted the possibilities of discord and chaos. Okay? Aristotle also contributed in the field of taxonomy. He is the first person to somehow created and classified organisms based on his interest. Kaya yung school niya ay sa mga puno-puno, halaman-halamanan, because he really loved nature and he loved to view on this. So he's the first person to create a taxonomy. Pero yung taxonomy niya before is different from the taxonomy that we have right now. Aristotle trusted the senses. He used it for his works, such as History of Animals. He is one of the first to write down his observation on animals and classified them in their kinds. He also tried to order them in living things, animals, which led to the taxonomy, as I have said. He also attempted to answer the question, what is life? The taxonomy he created were based on that he called the system of souls. So ang taxonomy niya ay system of souls. First is plants. Plants is the simplest soul. They have a vegetative soul. Number two, next is animals. Animals have a mobility soul and have a vegetative soul and have a sensitive animal soul. And humans, of course, are the highest form of soul. Combination of vegetative, sensitive, and rational soul. And these three allows the human to think and reflect. Okay. Aristotle is an idealist. Plato is an idealist. Aristotle is based his observations, based his theories and his works on his senses. He created a taxonomy called the system of souls. Itong system of souls na to may tatlo: plants, animals, and humans. Plants, simplest, vegetative soul. Ibig sabihin ng vegetative soul, they grow. Animals, vegetative soul, and mobility soul, they grow and they move. Mobility. They move. Kasi di ba ang plant naman hindi naman nakakagalaw. Pero ang animals nakakagalaw wherever they want. But humans have the vegetative soul, meaning they grow. They have mobility soul. We are able to move. Humans are able to move. And lastly, the rational soul. We are able to think. Okay? I hope, no? Since ang ibig sabihin ng vegetative soul, they grow. Ang mobility soul, they move. Ang rational soul, they think. Okay? I hope we're all okay. Nakakasabay po ang bawat isa sa ganitong discussions natin. Natural philosophers. Both Plato and Aristotle's views on material and natural world influenced many philosophers. Yung after nila, succeeding philosophers. They both inspired centuries of scholars to think about thinking, about the laws of nature, and reflect on the universe. It's true. We are thinking about what are thinking, reflecting on the laws of nature, and reflect on the universe na sinundan ng mga sumunod sa kanila. Of course, the ancient Greece, kagaya ng ancient Egypt, did not survive that long. The ancient Greece has indeed contributed a lot and has rippled through centuries and across the world. But just like Egypt, kahit gaano ka-powerful and long-standing ang greatness ng mga civilizations na to, ancient Greece ended because of the Roman conquest in 146 BC. But natural philosophers did not end. The natural philosophers continued all throughout the centuries. So that is our discussion for natural philosophers. What I've mentioned are only exclusive for Greece, mostly Greece. The natural philosophers are largely contributed by the Greek civilization. We discussed about PreSocratic, Socratic, and then Plato and Aristotle philosophers and their contributions on science, on the history of science and technology. Should you have any questions, feel free to comment on the comment section and I will try to answer that on the next video. And next video, we will be discussing about the engineers, the architectons, the engineers or the artists. Of course, that will be on the lesson 4 of still chapter 1 of the history of science and history of science and technology. No, let's see. Lesson 3 pala. Lesson 4. Tama, lesson 4. Should you have any questions, feel free to comment on the comment section. I hope nakasabay po. If you have any comments, if I talk too fast, if I discuss too fast, please write it on the comment section and I will address those problems on the following and next videos. Again, I'm very sorry for quiet noise that you are hearing. No? Okay, thank you again and God be with you all. Thank you.